So those of you who have been with us before know that I'm Irini Allen and I'm the director of the Institute for Classics Education. I am so thrilled today to welcome Diane J. Rayor, Professor Emerita of Classics at Grand Valley State University in Michigan. Diane translates Greek poetry and drama, including absolutely transporting collection of Sappho, a new translation of the complete works, the Homeric Hymns, Euripides Medea, which was performed by the Center for Hellenic Studies is Reading Greek Tragedy Online, Sophocles' Antigone, and Sappho's Lyre, Archaic Lyric, and Women Poets of Ancient Greece. Her translation of Euripides' Helen and Hecuba are under contract with Cambridge, and she was granted the Loeb Classical Library Foundation Fellowship for translating Euripides' Helen, and served as the University of Colorado's Roe Green Visiting Theater Artist for Euripides' Hecuba. Her tragedy translations have been performed in Australia, Canada, Singapore, the UK, and the US. So Diane, thank you so much for being here, and I'll just turn it over to you now.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to join your group and to talk about really my favorite topic, which is translating. So thank you very much. I'm going to divide up the time between talking about translating Sappho, and who's the earliest Greek woman poet whose work survives in fragments, and talking about the Homeric hymn to Demeter. And so you have the handout for Demeter, although I'll be sharing the visual for the parts that I'm talking about for Sappho. Also note that there's a recording of all of my translations of Sappho is freely available online at Cambridge. And so you don't have to buy the book. You can just download the audio for that. So you can go back to these as you wish. So let's see, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. Okay. And is everyone seeing that okay? Okay.
I'm seeing it, yeah.
Okay. So, I have been translating since college. In my junior year in college, I started translating Sappho, and I think beginnings are important. But I'm going to give you kind of an overview about literary translation first, and then I'll talk about how I started translating and why. So literary translation is quite different than the translating that you do when you're learning a language, right? Where you're translating it to make sure that you're understanding it or that your teacher sees that you're actually able to read. Literary translation is a really intimate embrace of the text with the goal of bringing the original to a new audience. And my two criteria for that are to be very precise. I need accuracy. And so I'm not talking about all translators. I'm talking how I do literary translation. And I need to get the details right so that for people who can't read Greek, can't read the original, they get as much as I can get into it. But if it isn't also poetry, both as literature to read, but also as an oral experience, since all the work that I translate was originally performed, then it's not working either. So it needs to be precise and it needs to be poetry. All translators, anything that you read that is translated comes through an individual. I mean, I wish we could just do that tracing paper, right? Put the right, put the original, put a copy paper over it and translate it into the new language. But that's not how it works. It goes through an individual. So the translator as reader becomes the writer of the new work. So all the different things that you do as a reader and then it has to come out as something as close as possible. So translating performance poetry is always balancing between the tug of the two languages and between the times, especially when it's ancient poetry, the context, the cultural values, whether it's reader or audience, right? How am I doing that for the various different genres, right? Because translating fragments of lyric poetry is quite different from fragments from like the Homeric hymns, which are whole texts or primarily whole, and certainly different than translating tragedies. So what I always look for are techniques to emulate, and I'll be giving examples of these with the flow of the text, which is also kind of the tempo, the repetitions, rhymes, rhythms, alliteration, what form it is in, right? Stanza or dialogue, and also dealing with the individual voice, the voice of the poet or the voice of a character, and the physical text, because we have texts, right? It's not just something I'm coming up with. I'm not paraphrasing. We've got a text, and I need to find a way of balancing that. And my main technique is actually listening. I listen to the Greek over and over. I listen to the English aloud, usually by uh, listening both myself and other people. I'm always asking family members, colleagues, students. In plays, I've got actors. So I'm always having people read it out loud and see what are they not getting? What am I not hearing? What are they not understanding? And then adjusting it accordingly. So there's a lot of back and forth that goes into this. As, and what I try to do is get everything possible into the poem, but that also includes where things are missing. I show the gaps. Now, earlier in when I started in 1980s translating, most translators of fragments, for example, filled in or trimmed out the gaps so it would look more complete. And I don't do that. I show you this is the text we have, this is what's missing. It's not what Sappho's saying, but this is what we have. So, in this, so Sappho lived on the island of Lesbos around 600 BCE, and she was a famous singer-songwriter from her time on. So people would do cover songs of her work, and that's how these poems have survived over the years, right? Um, but it was all performed to an audience, and she tells us that she sang it for her women audience, and as well as for festivals, weddings, other more public occasions. So this first poem that I'm showing you is in the numbering of Sappho texts, number 2, and I'm showing you this one for a couple reasons. One is it's the first Sappho poem that I ever translated when my teacher in college asked me to translate this poem of Sappho because she didn't like any of the other ones available. And so I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. Um, and once I translated a poem, I couldn't stop. And that's what I decided was going to be my translation. That was going to be my profession. I was going to start with translating Sappho and keep going. So this is a poem that was found on a potsherd. So, there's pieces that are here and not here, and more was found later. But in this one, and what and can everyone see this? Okay, good. So what is happening in this poem is echoed in the sounds. So this is something that I was trying to get, is where my sound would echo the action of the poem, which is enchantment. Come to me from Crete to this holy temple, here to your sweet apple grove, altar smoking with frankincense. Cold water ripples through apple branches, the whole place shadowed in roses. From the murmuring leaves, deep sleep descends. And it continues, but I wanted to stop on that second stanza because that stanza is full in the Greek with the omega. And it's kind of an om sound. And although I couldn't get that sound in, I tried to have some echoes in sound. From the murmuring leaves, deep sleep descends. So the sound is echoing what it's doing. And the other thing I wanted to point out is how much choice translators have, because the very last word that I translated, joys, here, Aphrodite, after gathering, pour into golden cups nectar lavishly mingled with joys. So picture what this is Sappho is saying, Aphrodite, come to this temple of yours, and you're going to be pouring us wine. But it's not wine, it's nectar. It's pouring nectar like wine. And this nectar is mingled with thaliaceae. So it's mingled with, it could be joys, it could be festivities. It comes from the word for growing things. It's one of the three graces, thalia. It could be herbs. Maybe they mixed their wine with herbs, which the Greeks did. Maybe it was spiked. Who knows? So there's all sorts of different possibilities in choosing the language. And from that one, and I do see a hand up. Is there a question right now? Or should we, I was planning on holding questions for like the last 10, 15 minutes. Will that work for you?
I think that'll be fine.
Okay,
We'll hold, yeah.
okay. Because some of them might get answered as we go. So in the very first Sappho, which is sometimes called the hymn to Demeter, we have, hymn to Aphrodite. I wanted first to look at kind of the form. You'll notice the stanza form, which is called the Sapphic stanza in the Greek below. And I couldn't do that in English. And so wherever possible, when there's a Sapphic stanza, I try to do something like this form so it looks pretty, because visually I want it to look pretty. I can't always do it. And the reason for that is because I refuse to mess with the language to force it into something, which is also why I don't do it in meter. The Greek doesn't have end rhymes. It has internal rhymes and, all of the different things that Greek, which is so beautiful, has in it. But the focus that I want here is just trying to get the shape and to work with the sound, but also be very precise in the meaning. So here we have poikilothron nathanata Aphrodita for the very first line. So it's beautiful. You see, there's just 3 words. Can't do that in English. But here I have deathless Aphrodite on your iridescent throne, while weaving daughter of Zeus. I beg you not to break my spirit, O queen, with pain or sorrow. There's so many possible choices here because deathless Aphrodite could be undying, unaging, right? But the most is this poikilos, iridescent, because that throne that Aphrodite is sitting on is this throne of power. But poikilos can mean so many different things. It can be dappled. It can be the light coming through trees. It can be the dapples on fawns. It can be embroidery. It can be inlaid wood. It can be any kind of mixture of texture, material, colors. So it can be different hues. It can be, you can have a poikilos mind, a complex mind. So with all these different possibilities, I tried to find something that captured that complexity, but has a good sound. And then because Sappho uses, even in the fragments that we have of hers, she uses it so often, I tried to get a word that would work with every instance of it, and I got it except for one. But again, if it doesn't work for the particular one, I'll change it. Um, so that's kind of my model, is trying to get it to sound good while staying with the meaning. The same thing with this while weaving daughter of Zeus, because deathless and daughter, it could be child, right? All of that. And it's dolos ploke. It's dolos is cunning, allure, wiles, right? That's kind of sneakiness. And weaving can be weaving on the loom. It can be plaiting your hair. It can be the weaving together of poetry, of song. So all of that, and even choosing queen. Potnia. Potni means lady. It's the revered one. It's only used of goddesses. So queen isn't quite right. Best I could do. And that's all of it in this. Now, the first Sappho has 28 lines, all in 4-line stanzas. And for the whole one, turn to my book or the recording. But here, I wanted you to get a sense of what does Sappho do when she's using a voice? Because in this poem, she's praying to Aphrodite to come to her once again, like she did before. And she talks about how Aphrodite flew down in her sparrow-pulled chariot to help her before. And she quotes Aphrodite. And so it's like it's an epiphany. But here's Aphrodite's voice. Once again, whom must I persuade and lead into your love? Sappho, who wrongs you? If now she flees, soon she'll chase. If rejecting gifts, then she'll give. If not now loving, soon she'll love, even against her will. So think of what Sappho is doing here. She's getting Aphrodite's voice. It's kind of funny because it's like Aphrodite coming again. Sappho, so who are you in love with this time? So what do you want me to do? Okay, I'm going to do it. It's also Homeric. It's a prayer, and it's in a prayer formula. Um, Aphrodite is like she is in book 3 in the Iliad, when she tells Helen that if Helen doesn't do what she says, she'll make everybody hate her as much as they now love her. So she forces Helen to go against her will. So this is a very powerful goddess who is able to make people do something even against their will. Um, what's important here too is I wanted you to notice pronouns, because in Greek, all these she's that I have in this stanza, in the second stanza here, don't exist. Because what we have in the Greek is you don't know that Sappho is talking about loving another woman until you get to the end of this particular stanza. So, but we can't do that in English. In the Greek, the participle at the end, kouk the etheloisa here, is even her not being willing. And that tells you that it's feminine. But in English, try as I might, I couldn't get it without the English pronouns. So I had to put all those in there so that it would make sense grammatically in the English. Now, because it's just that one little word that not willingly at the end in the Greek, early in translations of Sappho, they actually changed it. At least the first translator into English made it all masculine, so Sappho would be asking for a male partner instead. But no, the Greek is female. So gender matters a lot, particularly because with Sappho, she was most famous for her translation, her songs about desire for other women. And, some of those women would be in her audience in the names that come up. But it's the translator, you have to make decisions because in this one, for example, sweet mother, I cannot weave, slender Aphrodite has overcome me with longing for a girl. The word paidos is the common noun pais, which can mean boy, girl, slave, daughter, right? There's all sorts of things that word can mean. Now, in my earlier translations, and everyone else's translation up until that one, everyone used boy or youth. And then when I came out with this version, most people have switched over because it makes sense for Sappho's translations. But it could be boy. It could, we just don't know. This is where you need to read the original language because how else can you tell? You can't trust translators. I mean, you can trust me as much as possible, but there's always choices. Now, in all my translations, I do have notes so that where there's a question like this, I do put it in the note so you can tell. But here, what I did is in all the surviving works of Sappho, I went through all of them. And every time that the word pais shows up, I tried to determine male, female, what. Most of them are having to do with girls or daughters. They're female. And there's one of Dionysus. There's one that has an article that tells you it's masculine. And so I felt like I could go with girl here. Now, paying attention to the gender matters in Sappho's poetry, and I think in all translations. But here, for example, we know that Sappho was singing to her companions because she tells us so. Now I will sing this beautifully to delight my companions. The Greek word etairais in Sappho's Greek, but hetaira in Attic Greek, for example, hetairas they could be companions in Homer. The hetairos were Odysseus' companions, for example. But here it is female. In this first one, I couldn't get it in, but I was able to do it in May You Sleep on the Breast of a Tender Girlfriend. So it's the same word, but here I was able to get that kind of double sense that we have of a friend that's a girl or a girlfriend. And here also, for you beautiful women, my mind never changes. We just have the adjective, but it's a feminine adjective, so we know what it is. Perspective, knowing Sappho's work, but also in each individual poem or song, rather, matters. And this is one of my favorite ones. And let me just, okay. And in this one, and we have a definite perspective. I even used this when I was teaching writing composition as a 5-paragraph essay. So the thesis, some say an army of horsemen, others say foot soldiers, still others say a fleet, is the most beautiful thing on the black earth. I say it is whatever one loves. Everyone can understand this. Consider that Helen, far surpassing the beauty of mortals, left behind the best man of all to sail away to Troy. She remembered neither daughter nor dear parents as Aphrodite led her away. Unbending mind, lightly, thinks. This reminds me now of absent Anactoria. I would rather see her lovely face, her lovely step, and the radiant sparkle of her face than all the war chariots in Lydia and soldiers battling in arms. Here we have a very clear perspective where people are given choices. Yeah, some think war things are the best. Some thinks a person is the best. Maybe somebody thinks power, money, whatever. Some say whatever, I say it is whatever one loves, one considers most beautiful, Calliston, the most beautiful of all. So what we have here, the whatever is so important. One needs to be very precise. Some translations put whoever, but that's not right because we're not just talking about people or a particular person. It is whatever one loves is the most beautiful in our own eyes. And then we have the example. Okay, everyone can understand this. And then we get Helen's perspective. She is the one who objectively has the most beauty. But here she's not the object. Here she left behind the best man of all. She left behind her daughter and her parents because of what she wanted. What did she think was the best, the most beautiful? Well, clearly it wasn't the best man of all, Menelaus, her husband, and Paris's name isn't even in here. So this focuses on Helen herself. So in my translations, I try to make that clear. Where we can't tell, like where I have a bracket around Aphrodite, that's because as it looks like it's Kypros, Aphrodite's other name, and it is active, so that's most likely. I have asterisks to show where there's a whole line missing. We've got a couple fragments, but what I don't want to do is fill in with my own ideas what Sappho might have meant here, or trim these out so you think that there's nothing missing. But then Sappho moves on here to say that absence is important here. I'm reminded, this triggers my memory of my beloved Anactoria. And what does she appreciate most? It's not a description, just like we don't have a description of what Helen looks like. It's her aura, it's her lovely step, her sparkle, right? And that, to the eye, to Sappho here, is more important than anything else. Whoops, let's see. Why is that not going down to the next slide? Huh, okay. Is that the next one I wanted? Yes, okay, good, it did. So here, this is a song that was found in 2 different times. And so the way back in, I think it was like 1904, a papyrus was discovered with part of this on it. And then in 2004, another chunk was discovered. And they just fit together like a puzzle piece, which of course is what I always think of translating. It's like, is what is the right word? What is the right thing here? And here there are some pieces still missing. Those are what's in the brackets. But this one is also interesting because the new find in 2004 didn't include the last two stanzas that the earlier one did. So some people have said, well, it really ends with deathless wife, with the myth about Dawn, the goddess Dawn, marrying the mortal Tithonus. And that's where it ends. But other people, myself included, think that the poem as a whole needs this ending because it ties it together with what Sappho is saying here. And so here, again, there's so many choices. We have Sappho's talking about different kinds of beauty. So I try to keep the word beautiful wherever it's used, or beauty. I keep the stanza form, the two line here. I need to consider length of line, because if my lines get too long in printing, they will make them wrap over. And to me, visually, that's so ugly and it breaks up the rhythm and I just can't stand it. So in my contract, I say they can't do that. But it also means they have to be willing to, make it fit, and I have to be willing to keep it short enough to fit. So that's, just thinking about it for the eye as well as the ear. So, what we have here is, it's often called her poem about old age. Reveal the beautiful gifts of the violet-robed muses, girls, dancing to the song-loving voice of the sweet-toned lyres. My skin was delicate before, but now old age claims it. My hair turned from black to white. My spirit has grown heavy, knees buckle that once could dance light as fawns. I often groan, but what can I do? It's impossible for humans not to age. For they say, pierced by love, rosy-armed dawn went to the ends of earth holding Tithonus, beautiful and young. But in time, gray old age seized him, even with a deathless wife. Two little fragments. Yet I love the finer things. Know that passion for the light of life has also granted me brilliance and beauty. Now, of course, I love this poem partly because my hair turned from black to white, my knees, I'm aging, all of that. And I love that Sappho doesn't just have young people love songs and wedding songs, but also includes us as we age. And so I love that, but I also see what she's doing with her words here, with kala for the beautiful Dora, the beautiful gifts that the muses give, right? That's song, that's dance, that's poetry. And that we have kalon, the masculine, for Tithonus. He is also beautiful. That's a different kind of beauty. And in the last line, we also have tokalon, beauty itself. So what I'm seeing here, as Sappho is saying, is there's the beautiful gifts that us poets have, that us singers have. There's the beauty, the physical beauty, but there are these finer things. There's the passion that also grants this luster, the light of Helios, the light of the sun, and beauty. So for us who are following those gifts of the muses, we can grow old with it. We still have this kind of beauty, this brilliance and beauty. So to me, it all works together with the myth forming part, just like in 16, where the story of Helen formed part of the explanation to get to the ending. So that's one of my favorites. I need to end the Sappho part. I did want to mention one other thing in this is not only are there decisions, but so much is based on scholarship, because you have to read all the material about the new finds, the latest text, the Greek editions. So example, that pierced by love, that was suggested as a good guess in a fairly recent article. And so all of those details are important for me anyway, for becoming a translator. Now, I don't have time to go over this absolutely beauty, this epic style poem of Sappho's that we have, that it's this wonderful about the wedding of Hector and Andromache. So I'm going to just mention a couple things. I have Undying Fame, Kleos Aphthetone, noted here because this tells you that this is, yes, this is epic. This is what all the heroes were aiming for, is fame that outlasts their lives. But we also then have all these different listing of these beautiful things and this beautiful Andromache. And we have the songs, and it ends with, and all praised Hector and Andromache, godlike. Now, the Greek also ends with that. And I have the Greek at the top here. So it has a hymn, a song of praise. It has Hector, Andromache, their names right next to each other, godlike. And some translators will make it godlike Hector and Andromache. But I think Sappho put the godlike because both of them are godlike. And that's why it ends, and it's right after Andromache's name. So those are some of the details that help make these things work. Now I need a quick sip before I turn to Demeter. And this is where you're definitely going to want to download the handout, because I'm only going to look at the very beginning here in the time we have. And so to read more of it, you'll want to look at the handout. If you can, take a look at my book, because it has an introduction and notes, and it describes step by step everything that's going on. And in it, I have everything that my students asked about. Every question they had, I either got it into the translation or it's in the notes or introduction. So hopefully it can be a standalone and answer questions, but I'll see what I can get to here. But I do want to leave plenty of time still for questions so we can focus on whatever you're interested in. Okay. So the Homeric Hymn to Demeter recounts Persephone's abduction by Hades, the ruler of the dead, and her cyclical return and to rejoin her mother, Demeter, the grain goddess. And it is one of the most beautiful, moving, and culturally important Greek stories, which is why I started translating it. I also started translating the Homeric hymns because in my mythology classes, the ones I was using were, I had to keep explaining, but what the Greek really says. So finally, I just translated it myself. So, but it is the earliest literary version of the myth and the earliest origin story of the Eleusinian mysteries. So all the hymns, they celebrate the gods and goddesses. There's 32 of them. And it refers to Homeric because it's in Homeric epic meter, the dactylic hexameter, every line. And but they were all anonymous. And so in that way, it's Homeric and it's hymns because of the celebration of it. The hymn to Demeter is particularly interesting to many people because it's so much from the mother's perspective. And so in my goals for translating this, I wanted to get the formulaic style. This was oral, this was performed. I wanted every epithet, those tags on the names of the gods. And I wanted to get as much of the word placement matching, lengths of the lines to square up with the Greek, not too long, not too short. They didn't look like lyric poetry, but English, it's hard to get everything and keep it condensed as the Greek is. I also wanted to get that perspective. And since Demeter is the grain goddess, there's a lot of plant imagery. So I didn't want to leave anything out. So nothing is missing in this. Nothing is added. The number of the lines in Greek and English match, although of course for English sense and syntax, they're not always, line by line. Have to switch a few things around to work. But in the first 9 lines, there's 10 epithets to the gods. And they do matter. Many translators have trimmed out epithets or done lots of different versions, but mostly trimmed out a lot of them because for modern reading, we don't do that. But oral poetry did. They had lots of repetitions, and I think all of the epithets matter. Now, I didn't come to this conclusion on my own. When I first translated the Homeric Hymns, I submitted it for review, pre-publication, and I got back, who I later found out was Ann Sutter, shout out to her work, because she said, oh no, you can't leave out all these epithets, they matter. And I read it over again and realized, yeah, they do matter. There's this repetition of epithets has a cadence, it has a rhythm, and it has a cumulative meaning in it. And so I went back and they're all back in here. So every single one is here. So you have the revered goddess. I sing of the revered goddess, rich-haired Demeter, and her slim-ankled daughter, whom Hades snatched, when far-seeing thundering Zeus gave her away, while she and ocean's deep-breasted daughters played, far from golden blade Demeter, who bears shining fruit. She picked lush meadow flowers, roses, crocuses, lovely violets, irises, hyacinths, and a narcissus Gaia grew as a lure for the blossoming girl, following Zeus's bidding to please Lord of the Dead. So let's take a look.
So,
Rich-haired
uh,
Demeter is used only of Demeter, her mother, and this connection. So it's of course, she's a goddess of growth. Slim-ankled daughter. This puts her in the position of young, desirable. Hades snatched her, harpazdo, like where we get the word harpies. It's a violent word. It's not just, yeah, he took her, he kidnapped her. It's snatch, like the harpies. Far-seeing, thundering Zeus gave her away. Think of right off what we have here. We've got the names of the gods, and we have Hades snatched, Zeus gave. Right away, we have, by the placement, we see a perspective here. Hades kidnapped. That's how Demeter and Persephone see it. Zeus gave her away in an arranged marriage. Oh, that's what Zeus and Hades think, right? So this is where placement and emphasis matter. And I'll show you the Greek in just a minute. Golden blade Demeter. Think about what that means. It's a blade of grain, yes, but it's also her sword that she uses to conquer Zeus. She wins. Zeus starts off winning, but he has to give in to Demeter, at least into a compromise. So she has that blade. We have all these flowers. Gaia grew following Zeus's bidding. She grew a narcissus, and it's a dolos. That's that wile weaving Aphrodite word for the blossoming girl. The girl, the kore, is the Greek word, which is her title in the Eleusinian Mysteries, is blossoming. She's actually like a flower bud face girl. And so the flowering girl is picking flowers before she herself is plucked. So one after the other, you get the meaning, the epithets, the growing, all of this meshes together. And I'm going to show you both together in just a minute, but I wanted you to see, even without reading Greek, the things I have underlined. Demeter begins the hymn in the Greek. I couldn't get it at the beginning, so I put it at the end. Here we have the title for Hades at the end of the second line with Zeus right below him. Again, I have that in the right order, although they couldn't go in the end of the line. Here, because Greek is so wonderful, let me just say again, Greek is so beautiful. We have harpaxen doken. We have the two verbs back to back. Hades, harpaxen, Persephone. Zeus, doken, gave. So because I couldn't get those two words to work in English back to back, I have Hades followed by his action, Zeus followed by his action. So at least they would have that same placement, even if I couldn't do exactly what the Greek was doing. Here also, we have the Narcissus at the beginning of the second to last line here, while we have that blossoming girl here with the chore at the end of the line. I did that by having them, the Narcissus first, followed by the blossoming girl. Are you getting the sense that nothing is by accident in the translations? And here in the Greek, you have Gaia Dios, because again, Greek can do that. Greek can put Gaia and Zeus back to back here, because Gaia is following Zeus's will. Here, I had to just put them one after the other for English. And wherever there's plant imagery, whenever these epithets come up, I try to keep them consistent, particularly in the Homeric hymns, so that we can make these connections. Like, how often is Demeter called this? How often Zeus? What about Hades? What about Persephone? Right? And then we can see who else is called that. So here, I just wanted to give you a sense of line length, pretty similar, a little longer because that's how English is, but not a lot, not too skinny. And again, just the sense of how these go back to back. And of course, I never looked at my list to see if I got everything in that I wanted to tell you, but it will have to do. I've got one more last thing I wanted to mention, is that how important it is to talk about translation, because when you read a translation, you are never reading the original. You're reading somebody else's reading and writing of it. So you want to always get the best that you can based on the best edition in the original language by the best possible translator. And there's going to be so many differences. And translations do different things. My tragedy translations are for performance as well as reading in the classroom. So I do different things than someone who it was just meant for performance or just the classroom. But the more translators get recognition, have their names on their books, not just the author, but also the translator, the more we can get younger people to, more translators we can get, right? We need more and more translators. We need the next generation of Sappho translators, all of this. And so the more that in academics, translators are valued and they can get tenure, they can get promotions by their translations, and they are recognized, the more people will go into that field. When I was first job searching, I said, this is what I do, I'm a translator. And they said, yeah, but what will you really be writing? And so, okay, those didn't work. And the job I took, and I had a choice between two, were ones where I said, this is really what I'm doing. And fortunately, I was valued for that. But even in my last book, my Sappho book, which I have been working on since 1978, and this was always my goal to have a standalone Sappho book. I invited someone else to do the introduction and notes for me, but of course I edited everything they did and all of that. But because I am listed as translator and editor on many venues, you will see it by the guy that I invited in to write the introduction and notes, not under my name as translator. And you can tell that still bugs me. But it was my own fault too, because I was very generous. I said, yes, put his name on the cover. Yes, you can put him down as editor too, because he was very helpful. Um, but just so you know, this is the state of translation, even with all these different famous translators now, like Emily Wilson and all these other wonderful new translators. They still have to, most of them are older and they've already, gotten on promotions or whatever ahead of time before they turn to translation. So we want new ones. And thank you very much. I hope I saved enough time for some conversation.
Yes, that was wonderful, so thought-provoking. And I'm going to stop the recording now so we can have a conversation. But I also invite anyone watching later to post any questions that they may have. So thank you so much again, Diane, for that
You're
wonderful
welcome.
talk.